All right, well, welcome to the Georgia Track and Field Cross Country Coaches Collective. My name is Nick Hustalakis. I'm the head track and field coach at Marietta High School. And we highly encourage everybody to visit our website at Georgia spelled out, GeorgiaTFXCcollective.com, where we have plenty of documentation. We have a bunch of literature donated by coaches, handbooks, whatnot, for new coaches to look through and get some great ideas for this upcoming spring and for all the cross country coaches for this upcoming fall as well. Also follow us on Instagram. Um, but without further ado, today our guest is Coach Ryan Davis. He is the head track and field coach at Woodward Academy. Coach, thank you for joining us today.
Nick, thank you for having me, man. I really appreciate what you guys do for the sport, and I'm excited about being on with you guys.
Man, I'm looking forward to it as well. All right, with that being said, Coach, how did you get into coaching? How are you the head track and field coach at Woodward Academy? How'd that all come about?
Well, I mean, my coaching roots go back more than a lot of people know. My dad was a longtime coach in Columbus, Georgia, by the name of Wallace Davis, where he coached football, and he had a great career coaching football and track and field. So it's always been in my bloodline. I remember being up late at night watching football films. I remember being in the springtime going to track meets as a little kid playing in the sand pit. So um, once I, inherited that culture kind of from my father, I always knew it was going to be in my bloodline. I was lucky enough to get a football scholarship and play football at Georgia, and just halfway through my football career, I was like, look, I want to run track again. I miss the sport. I miss being a part of it, and at that current time, Jim Dunning was my coach, and I just went and asked him. I said, hey, can I go run track? He was like, well, as long as you meet all the football requirements, hey, you can go do it. So I went and sat down with the track coaches, and they allowed me to come out. So that was a great opportunity for me to learn, and it was kind of a release for me. Football, as you know, is high stress, and track was a little bit more relaxed. So it allowed me to get out there and just be around different people and travel and go to meets and stuff like that. And from there, I knew inside I was always going to be a part of sport. It just so happened I was blessed enough to land at Woodward Academy when nothing came out football professionally wise. So um, took it as an assistant coach, assistant track coach, assistant football coach, and understudied under the great Tim Hamlin as the track coach. And when he retired, he passed the torch to me. So it led me to where I am now. And I just have tried to pick up where he left off, building a good legacy of what we've done here at Woodward in our track program, through the years.
Absolutely. You guys have kept the ball rolling here. Coach, when he passed the torch on to you, you've kept the consistency going, and I'm going to pick your brain about that a little bit later. But you said a couple things there
Yep.
that I want to elaborate on. Coincidentally, LeBron Mitchell, a guy that I've been working with at Marietta for about 17
Yeah.
years now, was your college teammate. He speaks very highly of you as both an athlete and as a person. And you mentioned your father, you mentioned your dad, the reason why you're coaching. And we have also a mutual uh, friend and Chris Jameson. Chris Jameson is new to Marietta as our O-line
Yeah.
coach. And I got to tell you, he
Yeah.
speaks of your father in such high regard as his former coach. And I know he does this, whether he's admitted or not. He is trying to emulate your dad out there because he talks about his intensity and how your dad held him accountable. And he's out there and he's doing it
Right.
on the field. I know he's trying to model your father. So, with that being said, um, your dad helped mold you, or at least I'd assume your philosophy in coaching and whatnot. Anybody else? You said Tim Hamlin, your father. Where you coach multiple sports, and just to clarify, you also coach football in the fall, co-defensive coordinator, secondary coach, recruiting coordinator. That's a lot of
Man, I'm many
responsibility.
hats. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of and head track and field coach in the spring. So you do a lot there. Your father, Tim Hamlin. Anybody else help mold you as a coach in the past from the past?
Well, of course, you always have college coaches that leave a lasting impression on you. Like I said, I was brought into Georgia by by Jim Dunnan, and then picked up the torch from Mark Richt. So the values as a person and the character values that Mark Richt and that staff left, kind of molded there from there. And then on the track aspect, we had several coaches, but I think the one that sticks out the most is Coach Stewart, John Stewart, he's actually the head coach now at Southern Mississippi. He was the guy that when I talked to, he was like, "Yeah, come on, we'd love to have you out there." And just the way Stewart carried himself as a person, the character he brought, the way he treated his athletes, knowing the rigorous of being a student athlete, just allowing us to be ourselves and be free. I think he really, really left a lasting impression on me, as well as other coaches that I'm sure I'm going to forget in this grand scheme of things of life of being around people. But the things my dad, you mentioned Chris, and Chris, my dad was like a father figure to Chris, and that's kind of what he did for all of his athletes, girls and boys. Coaching multiple sports in a place like Carver, Columbus, that probably didn't have the resources that we have at Woodward, and doesn't have the resources that you guys had at Marietta. So, he had to make his own resources. So the things he did for those boys and those girls, where he, even if it was just buying them food on the way home, or picking them up in the morning and making sure they're at practice and not going down the wrong path. I remember the late 2, 3, 4 a.m. calls from parents to him. I need you to help me, get my son in line, or, he's out in the street. You got to go pick him up and bring him home. That was, where my dad kind of laid his groundwork in Columbus. The people he's touched, and just the legacy he left on kids down there in that area. You know, it's totally changed now. But back in the 80s, he was kind of the person that springboarded this recruiting thing. A lot of people don't know that back in that time, it was not a lot of blue stars and rivals and on three and stuff like that. But he's sending multiple kids every year to college, and that was his legacy. I think it's over 280 kids that he sent to college during a time when, nobody really knew about Columbus, Georgia, when he had, Wisconsin and Ohio State and University of Georgia and people like that coming to his school to get his kids. So those are the legacy that he left. And I just kind of have tried to take what he did and, intensified it and magnified it, to, meet the standard of what we want to do for our kids. So he is probably the flagship person that I kind of roll myself after, times 10, because of course it's things that have changed. There was no social media there. Was no computers back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. So all those things that we have to take advantage of, I do. And, hopefully it'll springboard me to help these kids to be where they want to be in life.
Yeah, that's outstanding. I just last, I mean, it's been the last couple weeks. What you just said, Chris Jameson reiterated to me, talking about the rides, the food, all of it. He absolutely was a father figure to those guys, and he had such a positive impact on so many people from the sounds of it. It sounds like he was an incredible person. So, thanks for sharing all that with us as well. How would your moving on to your coaching style? Everybody is, different. You got to be yourself, right? You got to be yourself. And kids know when you're authentic or not, whether you're loud, animated, or you're just, matter of fact. What is your coaching style? How would your athletes describe you?
Um, People loosely use the term players coach and things like that. I just try to be upfront and honest with the kids. I want to give them something to work for.
Right.
Um, in the grand scheme of things, I don't, I try not to be a screamer or holler. You have those old school coaches that are rah, 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 rah. I just talk to them, and I want them to know that I'm genuine and I'm upfront and honest. My style with them is I have an expectation, and kids know what my expectation. They know what my expectations are once they step on the field, the court, the track, in class. Walking around. I mean, I try to carry myself with the respect that you want to respect those kids, and you want them to respect you back. So it's just the expectation level that's laid early, those kids get. And once they understand it, they can trust you and they trust the process.
Yeah, that's you have to be authentic, have to be yourself. And for some people, the high energy stuff, it's who they are, and they can make it work for them. For me, when I was younger, I was very loud and intense, and now that I'm older, I'm the exact opposite. Like I've evolved into, like you said, I'm more talking. Like the kids know either if I'm extremely quiet, they know something's up, or if I get really loud, I get their attention real quick. But you have to be authentic. You have to be who you are. You can't try to imitate somebody else. And everybody, adults and kids, perform better when they know expectations, what they are, and when they're made
Yep.
clear. And kids appreciate that. And at the end of the day, too, I found kids, the real ones, the real athletes, and I'm not talking about God-given ability. I'm talking about the ones that are truly motivated to be at their best. They want to be coached. They want to be told the truth.
Yep.
They don't want any fluff and things like that. They want you to coach them, and be honest with them. Um, what would you say in track and field now as a head coach? We all wear many hats. Like we all have to do what's important at the moment. But what event or events do you gravitate towards as a track and field coach? What are your favorite events to coach?
Well, I've always been a sprinter. When I ran track, even in high school and college, I was a hurdler. And then I also ran sprints 1, 2, and raw relay. So I've kind of gravitated to the sprint. The luxury of being at a place like Woodward is, and I'm gonna give a shout out to all my coaches. We have a very, very, very good coaching staff where guys I trust. So like David Pointers, he works with our sprinters, and then Nick Widener and Leslie Widener, they work with our distance group, and Taz Sahar works with our vaulters, and Tom Bourne and Colina Collins, they work with our throwers, and Chase Parker and Summer Thompson work with our jumpers. So as a coach, it takes a lot of stress off you when you have good people around you that you can trust, and you can give them, hey, go do your job, go coach, go be an athlete. So go be a coach to our athletes. So it go back to the original question. I work mostly with the sprinters and the hurdlers. But like you said, as a head coach, and Tim, this is kind of what Tim talked to me about and kind of passed down. He was like, once you're the head coach, you can't really coach like you really want anymore because there's so many other duties. You're dealing with parents, scheduling, emails. You got to make sure the bus is here, water's there. If you have a lower program like we do, we have over 150 kids in our middle school program. So you want to oversee that and make sure that's running well. So it's kind of hard to say, hey, one thing at the end of the day, the thing that brings me joy is our kids being successful in their events. So of course, I'm gonna lean to the sprints because I did that, and that's what I did in college and did in high school. But as the head coach, I just want to see our kids are successful across the board.
Yeah, spoken like a true leader. You're gonna do what's needed. You just your amazing staff. I mean that's spoken like a true leader, coach. Which is no doesn't, like, you guys have been so consistent and have kept it going and producing at such a high level. So yeah. How do you stay current and up to date with the latest and greatest in track and field? I mean, there's all sorts of different, themes and whatnot and that type of stuff. I've always been, and I too, coming from a sprints background, football coach, basketball coach type stuff. I love the weight room, plyometrics, that type of stuff, and how can we implement it safely with large numbers, and how appropriate is it to start with your middle school? Like you said, we too are fortunate to have a middle school program. So how do you stay up to date, and how do you keep up to par with the latest and greatest in the training world?
Well, the biggest thing is I try to look at what the colleges are doing. I know like what Coach Carroll is doing over at Georgia with her program. So I try to see if there's things that, and I know we don't have all those athletes like they have at Georgia, but if it's something that I can pick up one or two things, I try to implement that. Like you said, we have the luxury to have some resources like weight rooms, and then we have multiple fields and different resources. One thing we've implemented with our sprint group is we've created kind of like a weight room on the track. So we have all our resources right there at the track. So sometimes we don't have to go all the way up to the weight room. We can do some things on the track. We've built where we have some run rockets and some T-Apex machines and things like that that are, showing where, that's what the pros are using. So I want to try to make sure we're staying up to date with modern technology. We're looking at getting other equipment like sleds and sandbags and things like that the colleges and the pros are using. And I'm still kind of old school. I'm going to go back to my dad. We didn't have these resources, so we had to make the resources. One thing that my dad prided himself on doing track, we ran the crap out of heels. So if we can get our access to some heels, we're gonna take advantage of that. So those are just some things that we do, and not so much to keep us current, just to keep us with what's going on with modern day athletics to make sure our kids are up to date. The biggest thing now that is learning, that is have kind of taken over, is the prehab and the rehab, all the, the ice and STEM and all that. So we're implementing that. We have a couple of people that come in and make sure they work with our kids for the prehab and the rehab and the post-workout stuff. So not so much as the supplements, just more of the stretching, the ice tubs, the cold tubs, the cryos, things like that will keep our kids in shape. We've also kind of transition to do as much stuff off track to take some of the pounding off of the shin splints. We've seen a drastic cutback in the shin splints and the stress fractures and things like that because we have pulled back off the track to do more things in the weight room, more things on softer surface to kind of save their legs to make sure they're prolonged for the long season. Because as yes, it starts in January, but it really starts, September, October, if they're doing it right. And then you have to go all the way through this month of May to make it a long season. So you want to make sure your kids are healthy when it's time for them to be healthy. All those things are kind of where we as a staff are trying to stay up on modern day times.
Yeah, we also we have a Mondo track, and I say that because it's such a hard surface. And if we were to pound our kids away day after day, starting back like you said, January, but really the kids that aren't doing a winter sport or a fall sport, they're going a couple times a week. And if we're not careful, if we don't monitor how much they're on the Mondo by the end of the season, by the end of the spring season, when you need them the most, when they should be at their best, the shin splints have derailed some great seasons for us, and we've learned the hard way. So we're always monitoring. We get them on a soft surface, absolutely. Then the prehab, we are working on ankle and joint stability all the time. We very particular with how much plyo we're doing, like with the kids. We make sure that we're not hitting that stuff 4 or 5 times a week and
right.
killing, you know what I mean? Like we're very measured with that type of stuff, and we've learned the hard way. We've made the mistakes in the past. So yeah, everything you just said hits home for sure. How long have you been at Woodward? You said 18 years. Forgive me, longer than that.
So no. So the crazy thing is, I've been there. This is going into my 22nd season.
Okay. Okay.
I graduated Georgia in '03 and landed at Woodward and kind of have been there ever since. But the advantage of being there is it's just a great place to be. You have great people you work with on a day-to-day basis, and this is even outside of the sports. Just your day-to-day, your 8 to 3 is peaceful. You have good people you're around every day, and then you deal with good kids. I mean, a lot like you guys, you don't deal with a lot of knuckleheads. So the kids are there for a reason. It makes the day easy. It makes practices easy. They want to learn. They're smart. So it's just been a good situation, and I've been kind of a good soldier. And once this opportunity came over to take over track, with Tim retiring, it was my turn, and I've just been a good soldier, and it's a good place to be. They take very, very good care of their employees. My son is in the first grade now. He's over there. So my wife is working over there. So one of my other coaches, one of my other coaches, who is actually my sister, and I'll give her a shout out. She's kind of our director of football ops type coach. And she ran at Georgia Tech, but her son went there, and she's helping out. So it is an extremely good family atmosphere over there. And once you get your foot in the door, it's kind of hard to leave. They do a good job of retaining their coaches, and it's a good place. I can't say enough good positive stuff about what the academy has done for me and my family, and the longevity, and just the resources, and talking to my dad, he knows that we're in a good spot over there. So it's a great place. It's a great place.
That's great to hear. And that leads to my next question too. Like, you do 2 sports, both of them are from a time standpoint are very demanding. But you do 2 sports at a high level. You're producing at a high level. What advice would you have for a newer coach? Like I said, whether they're new to track and field or whether they're just new to coaching, they're young out of college or whatever, just got a job. When I started off coaching, I got the position at the PE position at Marietta because I agreed to do 3 sports. I was doing football, basketball, and I was the head track coach. So that's how I edged out some other people. What advice do you have to a new coach, a young coach who's starting off, who is going to have to do multiple coaching positions like that and do it at a high level? What advice do you have for someone like that?
I mean, the biggest thing I would think is just make sure you surround yourself in a good situation. Now, I know everything's not perfect, and everything's not, but your style of coaching has to. At the end of the day, you're fostering these young kids, so you have to make sure your style of coaching is fostering these young kids, and they're trusting in you and trusting in the process. As you build your legacy or you build your mold of how you want to be as a coach, it's it's crucial that you make sure your legacy is made and it's a trust factor between you, your staff, your employees, your players, your parents. Everything is all about trust. So I think as a young coach, some young coaches come in real fiery with a lot of passion, but they don't build a trust in with their kids, or they don't build a coach to trust with the people around them. It's some humbleness. You got to eat a little humble pie as a new coach, especially coming into a place where, let's say you're like me. I was 23 years old when I started working at Woodward, and it was the older guys around me. I'm fresh out of Georgia, and I'm like, why are we doing this? Why we didn't do this in college? But I had to eat some humble pie to learn. Hey, sometimes can't do some of the same things you were doing there. And this is the way things are. So now, how do you take that information and build your own brand while you're there? So I guess the biggest thing to me, to young coaches, is just make sure that you build trust and build a legacy and learn from the guys that are in front of you. And that's one thing I did. Like I say, the Tim Hamlins, the, Mark Miller was there before I got there. It was other coaches that I had to learn from, the Greg Vandergrifts, Dale Wiggins. These guys were older than me. They had been in coaching. So I had to learn from them the good, the bad, and the ugly, and make sure when I had my opportunity, I presented what works best for me and my programs.
Yeah, amen to that. I would not be where I am as a professional, as an adult, without the support of amazing assistants. My wife also works in the school. She's the grad coach. She helps with academics with the track team. She helps the concession stand. I've got an amazing track and field staff. I have some
Yeah.
former head coaches who I welcome their input all the time. I'm not year to year always trying to evolve. I think if anybody's keeping track, I think I mentioned the name Jack Coleman every time I'm on this camera because that man so much he's our head cross country coach and does our distance, and then Jonathan Gambrell is also an amazing. Like I can go down the list. I have found that what has given me the best opportunity to be successful is to surround myself around great people that help make me complete with all my
Right.
shortcomings, and lean on the people around me. And when I was younger, again, like you said, humble pie, like this is what I did before and this is what works. So this is what we're all doing, regardless of whether it's working right now or not. And like you learn the hard way. I'm always evolving, and like I said, I'm always trying. Like that's why I have you on here to pick your brain a little bit to figure out the secrets because, you know, and that's ultimately what the goal of the collective of this whole thing is to
Yeah.
network and to get. I mean, there's so many amazing things happening in the state of Georgia, and people are willing to share and help. And again, you have to be willing to grow as a coach and put your ego aside. And when I was younger, you learn that the hard way. But building relationships and trust, like you said, that's also very important. I delegate a lot. I don't micromanage. I try not to micromanage. I try not to meddle with people. I let them grow as coaches and provide guidance and assistance where I can. But yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. So that leads me to my next question. You've been very consistent. What is the secret? I mean, you guys have won a couple state championships and runner-ups, and both boys and girls are finishing in the top 10, if not contending for a state championship. What's the secret to being consistent year in, year out?
I mean, I think the consistency is the kids. I was just doing some numbers as we realized I was going to do this talk, and since 2008, the boys have won 14 region championships, and the girls have won 12. Since 2009, we've been state runner-up 4 times for the girls, and we've won it 4 times with the girls. So I think the consistency is the kids. Um, kids buying into the program and learning, this is something that is pretty good. Now, we mentioned earlier the boys finished in the top 10. Uh, we had a chance to finish third this year, and I don't know if it was, yeah, it was raining at y'all state. It was pouring down, and we were in second place in the 4x4. We had to be top two, and kid, slipped and baton fell out. We went from second to sixth and finished seventh in that race, and that knocked us out of being top three. Um, but these are all vital lessons that kids learn. And I think the kids are the things that make the program run. The kids and the coaches. We've dealt with great kids in the past, and the biggest thing is we've made track a priority. So kids are serious about track and want to go run in college, just like with football or basketball or another sport. And like I tell every kid dealing with recruiting, if you have a desire to play at the next level, I'm gonna do all I can to make sure you're gonna play at the next level. Now, I don't know what school that'll be. We'll work that out. But if you put in the time, you put in the effort, you trust the process, and you keep hearing me saying trust the process, because so many people don't want to trust the process. As you know, so many parents, want to go left field when look, if your kid isn't good enough, they're not good enough. Right. Or maybe they are good enough, but maybe you need to get out of their way. So just trust the process and trust us as coaches. And that's another good thing. We have great parents that would abundance amount of support that we can't say enough positive things for. So I think the consistency it's the kids and the coaches and what we have over there. I think we got one of the top track programs in the state, if not, the Southeast, when it's all said and done, as a whole throughout our tradition. So, like I say, I can go and rip off a bunch of names of some kids that are running in college and have done great things like Gatorade Player of the Year and things like that. But at the end of the day, it's those kids that make our program successful. So we're excited and we, welcome those kids in. And people and kids want to be around, they want to be around winners. They want to be around like-minded people. They want to be around people who make them better. So as long as we're continuing to progress and continue to mold these kids the way they should be, they'll keep coming and we'll keep winning. So my goal is to always finish in the top two. And I was disappointed this year. And Pope had an amazing team. The things Pope did, and I can't say enough. I'm gonna pat them on the shoulder. What they did this year with those kids, I haven't seen a performance like that in a very long time. Somebody said it mirrored our performance when I won my first one in 2022. They over exceeded the expectations. So, kudos to them, heads up to them. They got a great program and he's doing a great job over there. But I was disappointed that we finished second, but they did their job. So our goal is to be in the top two every year. So
well, you guys,
as long as we can do that, the kids are producing, we'll do well.
You guys definitely have the culture that's allowing your kids to produce at a high level year in, year out. Like you said, kids want to be around winners. You guys made it a priority, and it shows. It absolutely shows. And you're right. We see Pope every year here in Cobb County, and they do a great job of running a complete program. I mean, they coach it all over there at Pope High School. So yeah, they kudos to them as well. We lost to them at the county meet this year. They took our girls team down, and they had a complete team. They had a little freshman hurdler too that was unbelievable. That came out of left field. They were. I mean, relays, distance. I mean, they have it all. Pole vault, throws, you name it. They had a complete team.
Yep.
And so my last question here, and you said you've been at Woodward Academy since 2003 or four. When I got to Georgia about 2008 was my first year. So back then we had boys and girls, two separate state meets at two separate locations, 3-day weekends. I mean, that was a grind of a couple weeks. I do not miss those days at all. Now, I thought Albany did an amazing job hosting, and I always thought Jefferson was a special place to go there, but it was on a personal level, it was a grind being in the hotel room 2 weekends in a row, all the money you're spending and all that. And now, they've shifted it to where it's a 2-day meet. Georgia GHSA has also adopted NFHS rules. We've incorporated the 4x2 and the 4x8. So since you got back in the early 2000s, since you and I got to the state or started coaching in Georgia, things have changed quite a bit to where we are here in 2025. And I don't want I don't want to lead you down a path. I want you to give me your own opinion. But my opinion, I think Georgia is one of the top 5 in the nation when it comes to track and field. So you tell me, where do you feel our state
100%.
is now? And with all the changes that have come, how do you feel about the state of track and field here in Georgia?
Well, to be transparent, like you said, Georgia is one of the top states in track and field. You look at what we're producing when it comes to the kids, the Gleaton kid at Langston Hughes, the Jasmine Robinson kid. So Georgia is producing the top athletes across the state, across the country. So there's no knock on them. I would say we're, in the top 3 or top 4 at least. Of course, you're always going to have your Texas and your Floridas and your Californias, but I feel like we're definitely right there with them. And when you flip over to football, we're right there with them. So I would say we're top 2 in football. So as far as the changes in track, I kind of miss the old way of how they used to run it. They used to run it where running event prelims were on Thursday, all field were on Friday, with some miles and some races, and then all finals on Friday. I miss that 3-day meet for multiple reasons. It gives the kids a day to rest. If you have a kid that's doing 3 to 4 events, they get a day of recovery, and everything's so back to back now. I I like the 4x8. I like the 4x2. That also incorporates, more opportunities for kids to run and kids to, score. I just don't like, or let me rephrase that. I'm not a huge fan of the order of the events. Now, I would like for them to maybe revisit the order of events, because you may have that kid that is going to run the 100, the 4x1, and the 400 or something like that, and that's all right back in there together, or the hurdles, and it's taxing on a kid. We actually had a girl, and it caught up with her. We were going to. She actually ended up winning state in the 400, but as a junior, she won the state in 300 hurdles. So she couldn't manage it. It was just too much on her legs. So we had to pull her out the hurdles, for her to be successful in the 400. So I really wish we could come up with a way to make, and it's no perfect solution. And somebody's gonna suffer, whether it's a sprinter or a distance runner. Somebody's gonna suffer, but I wish it was a way where we could maybe sit down and figure out how it got close to making everything right. And I guess it's no exact answer for it, uh, but I do miss the 3-day meet of that rest in between, for those runners to have that rest day in between. And just it was the hotel was kind of a grind. Another thing I wish we would look at is locations. We've been in Rome the last 3 or 4 years. We were in Columbus. I know Carrollton has a good facility. McEachern has a good facility. But I wish we could probably get locations better. I wish Georgia Tech's facility was a little bit, more accommodating. That would be an ideal place. Lakewood is in the heart of Atlanta with a lot of parking, a lot of resources, but it may not meet the standards of what they need. So I wish we would look at location and just maybe adjust the schedule just a little bit. But other than that, I'm excited about track. I love it. It's the reason I did it in college. It's my release from football. So I'm going to support wherever we got to go with this sport to make sure it's still a high profile and it's still at the top of its game.
Yeah, to me, when they were able to combine the two, and I loved back in the day being Albany, being able to see all classifications, and I love
Yes. Yeah.
all classifications. But the 2 different weekends were a grind. Just like I said, from a personal standpoint, being gone
Yeah.
in hotels with teenage kids, spending all
Yes.
that food, transportation, all that stuff. And I'm talking about the negatives, but the positives were we were doing it right from the standpoint of honoring the kids. It's a culmination. I mean, you're working. Some of these kids are working year round, 12 months a year,
Yeah.
sport. And when we condensed it down to 2 days, it was disappointing. What you're doing is you're penalizing the better athletes, is what you're doing. The athletes that can do 4 events at a high level. Yeah, so I agree with you. Like the location, that's always going to be tough. I know UGA is finishing their new track
Yeah.
complex. It's going to be finishing up here soon.
That'll be a
Georgia
good
Tech
spot.
is centrally located, but Georgia Tech unfortunately just doesn't have the seating, capacity to hold something like that. But like you said, something centrally located would be better for the sport. Coach, with all that being said, man, I really appreciate your time. I know you're busy, as I'm back on the field again, coaching here in the fall. So I appreciate your time here on a Sunday. to give us a few minutes to spotlight you and all the great things that you guys are doing over at Woodward Academy. I wish you nothing but the best of luck this fall and again in the spring. I don't doubt that you guys are going to be competing again and contending for some major hardware coming up. And best of luck to you, Coach, and thank you for your time.
No, I appreciate you having me on, Nick. And whatever we can do to help you, we're here for it.